We lost a sports legend this week. Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle now. And Bill, knowing that you have a strong connection with the state of Florida and specifically with the Miami area, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about your reflections on the loss of Super Bowl champion coach, NFL coach, Don Shula. As far as I know, he was the first and still the only coach to coach his team through an undefeated season and to win the Super Bowl. And at the age of 90, he passed away this week. Just when you first heard about the passing of Coach Shula, what were your initial thoughts?
I know we don't talk sports much on this show because I don't know much about sports, but I'm a fan of football, and I'm never really was much of a pro fan, except for when I came to Miami in 1970. I didn't even know what American football was or how it was played. But in 1970 in Miami, I want to say it was the 1970 Dolphins that had come from being like the worst team in the league to making the Super Bowl against the Cowboys, where they lost pretty badly. But 71 and 72 was their undefeated season. The entire city was electric, and I always thought in 1970 I would have been 11, 12, somewhere in there. And having just arrived from having spent 8 years in Bermuda, I always found and to this day feel that Don Shula was just one of the most American guys that ever lived. There was just something about him, something about his face, something about the way he spoke, something about his attitude on the field during the game. He just struck me as just a really solid, good American guy. And Miami has always been kind of a strange town. It's kind of the capital of South America. But there was something about Miami in the very early 70s when those Miami Dolphins in their turquoise uniforms were cool. But most of their victories, it seems to me, the team was just in all white. There's a white helmet, white shirts, white jerseys, and white pants. And I can't tell you what it was, Scott, but there was just something about that town and that guy that were so deeply connected. And I've never really thought of the Dolphins much since then. But those 72 Dolphins, 71 the year right after, 73 and so on. It seemed to me at the time that America was made up of Don Shula and the Dolphins, and it was an electric time, and I was very. I was sad to see him go, although 90 is a pretty good run, and Don Shula seemed to have made the most of it.
You know, it occurs to me that I was a little bit younger than you at that time, but not much. And the Dolphins, even though I lived in eastern Pennsylvania, the Dolphins were the first team that I can remember being a fan of. And I was for a number of years, and me and my brothers collected football cards. And when the Dolphins were playing, we would literally lay out the football cards on the field with the lineup that was playing at the moment. You know, and we were always glad when we had all the cards to represent the starting lineup.
Yeah, the first fantasy football league, you didn't even know it.
We did not know. And it was kind of a ridiculous activity because you really couldn't do anything. It was just like, okay, here are the players. Now what? But I remember being a big fan of the Dolphins for a number of years after that. And one thing that seemed to always strike people about Don Shula was his incredibly stoic nature. It seemed like, I mean, even though he was given to, vigorous defense of his righteous cause, let me just say it that way, it just seemed like as they're racking up this undefeated season, one game after another, you might have thought that he just came home from work and, at the coal mine, punched out on the clock and was sitting down to eat dinner.
Yeah, he had that regular guy quality to him, and the interesting thing about Shula, again, I'm not a big football fan. I just remember that period of time. But Shula, one of the things that impressed me most about Shula was that Shula didn't strike me as like an ascetic guy or a stoic. He was happy. He seemed gregarious, exciting, and so on. He had a personality. He wasn't just a rock. But I never really saw him lose his cool on the field. Now, I have to tell you, the only football I ever got serious about was Gator football, especially in the early 1993 to 1990.
I guess the characteristic that I noticed was his reserve
but
in victory.
Just this one point, because if you go from Don Shula, who's kind of like a rock solid guy, to 1990s Gator football, and you have Steve Spurrier, who iron control of his emotions, let's just say, was not his primary virtue. but Shula and the Dolphins, I can't put my finger on it. Now, so much of our lives are determined in ways that we don't really understand by the pop culture. I grew up in Bermuda. I was snorkeling when I was 4, I guess, and when Flipper came out, years before I moved to Miami, I just thought that was the coolest thing forever. And I thought, man, it'd be great to have a pet dolphin, I'll go swimming with every day. And buddy, I remember so clearly going to Dorney Park, just down the street from your old house. And it seems to me it was Dorney Park, amusement park in Allentown, that they had a dolphin. And the dolphin was in a plexiglass cage that just wasn't much bigger than the dolphin. And I don't know. There's a certain, what it is about the 72 Dolphins for a lot of people, I think, was they were such a Cinderella team. They had come from being just absolutely awful to making the Super Bowl. And it was something about those all-white uniforms. But despite the fact that it's been a long time since then, somehow in the back of my mind, I forget, I forget my parents' names, and I forget the, names of great generals and stuff. But somehow in my mind, from that period, burned into my mind is, Bob Greasy, Jim Kick, Larry Zonka, Nick Bonacotti, Mercury Morris, and Garo Upremian, who, by the way, was a terrific field kicker and caught a lot of grief for having thrown that interception in the Dolphins. Was at the 3rd Super Bowl appearance. But they were just it was just there. I think there are, let's put it this way. I think there are probably very few cases of times when a football team and the city that it represented came together to form such a unique kind of a synergy. Certainly Green Bay and the Packers have that relationship, and certainly the Steelers do with Pittsburgh and Oakland and so on, and Dallas. But I was thinking about this, Scotty, and I was thinking about when I'd heard that Don Shula passed a few days ago. And I was thinking about what life was like back in 70, 71, 72, and especially in the midst of all the, China and pandemics and our toxic political system and all of that. I thought, man, things just were so much easier then, so much better than on some way. And then I caught myself having just finished this Cold War special and realized, hey, now hold on now, 1972, you're just a couple months away from the Arab oil embargo, and my dad had just bought a Mercury Marquis station wagon, 1970 Mercury Marquis station wagon. We loved that car. It was so big you could launch jets off the hood of that car, and we loved it. And then the Arab oil embargo struck, and about 4 months after we bought the car and we had to wait in line for gas for an hour and a half, I'll just never forget the look on my dad's face when he came home and said, well, a few months ago, you'll all be happy to know, I just bought the car that has the worst gas mileage of any car manufactured in America. Our Mercury Marquis station wagon gets 7 miles to the gallon in the city. It would take you half the tank just to go to get the gas, and the other half to come home. But thinking about that time, which seems so innocent, and seems so idyllic, I really did force myself to say, okay, what really was it like then? We had the gas shortages. We just gotten out of Vietnam. That was a catastrophe. Watergate was just around the corner. And you want to talk about toxic politics and the feeling like the country is coming apart. It's going to be tough to match that. There were 25,000 Soviet thermonuclear warheads aimed at the Orange Bowl. Not all of them at the Orange Bowl, but enough of them. And furthermore, I know for people my age, nobody really knows when it happened, but somewhere between then and here, in high school, I had 3 friends who were killed in car accidents. I don't know. I haven't had anybody close to me die in a car crash, and I can't remember how long. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. In my deepest sympathies to people to whom it does happen, but still, those highway fatalities are just way down. Cancer was a death sentence. You heard the word cancer? How much time have I got? Those days are gone. The internet didn't exist. There was just an awful lot there that was worse. And I remember going through the process in my mind about thinking about how idyllic the past is, and that can be some warm fuzzy feelings, but it can also be a little dangerous and make you think that the whole world is running downhill.
Well, and I also think it's idyllic when I'm 11 or 12 years old in a way that it's not when I'm 58 years old. I think there are some things that stick in my mind. I actually, we were driving, by the way, an AMC Matador Ambassador Braun 9-passenger station wagon.
The ugliest car that has ever been manufactured in the United States.
It was a beauty.
No, the Matador was best described to me by somebody who said that this is the only automobile that looks like it actually had to take a crap in its own diaper. That's the absolute truth.
This was the Matador
was a
wagon.
hideous car.
This is the Matador Ambassador wagon. It was not the sedan.
Okay, that is mitigating. I'm willing to admit.
But in fairness, you're talking to a guy who also liked the design of the Gremlin and the Pacer.
As did I. I thought the Pacer was the coolest looking car in the history of the world. I thought the Pacer was awesome.
Could we get more glass on a car?
Yeah, exactly.
What strikes me, and it's clear from anybody watching to this point, all sports fans have left us by now because they realize that neither one of us really knows anything about sports. And so I don't even apologize to those people. They're gone. This is really, Don Shula is kind of on the timeline of our lives if you're from a certain generation. And one of the things that struck me in a review, Bill, that I read of his life after his passing was somebody who said Don Shula was competitive. Don Shula was competitive about everything. Don Shula was competitive eating breakfast.
Yeah, that.
And I thought, when you say, sort of a distinctly American character, it's this drive to be number one, to be the best, to do the work, to endure the grind, as Vince Lombardi called it, that characterizes Shula. And I think why, and maybe I'm wrong here, but tell me, why so many Americans who didn't even come from Miami or anywhere near it and wouldn't have otherwise been interested in Miami gravitated toward that team, that guy, that city.
That's a really great point. Because Don Shula was a winner, I mean, he moved from Baltimore to Miami, and he was a winner, and he did all of those things you talk about, and all of the hard work, and you can't be a football coach and not be tough, and you can't be a winning football coach and not be real tough. But there was always something friendly about Don Shula that I never knew the man. He might have been a horrible, horrible guy, but he didn't strike me that way. There was always a kind of a smile about the guy, a kind of this, I have two relatives who were closest to me growing up. I miss them both dearly. And one is my Aunt Marty and the other is her husband, my Uncle Rock. And just having an Uncle Rock is a damn cool way to go through life, to be honest with you. But my uncle was very much like him, looked a bit like him too. And there's a quality about a guy named Rock who got his nickname for his imperturbability. There's a quality to people who are gentle and kind and friendly and playful, and at the same time are made out of granite where it counts and when it counts. And to me, it is the ideal American combination. There's that incredibly great speech from Patton, which was largely modeled on an actual speech that George Patton gave. But in the movie Patton with George C. Scott was written by Francis Ford Coppola, that script. And he's talking to his troops and he says, America has never lost a war and will never lose a war because Americans love a winner and they will not tolerate a loser. And that, of all the things I think that I remember most about Don Shula is that he was cool under fire during adversity, and I never saw him, ever saw him gloat or grandstand or do anything other than win with grace and fun. And I will never forget the moment. I don't remember what game it was, but the Dolphins were playing. I was listening to it on the radio. It was the opening kickoff. It goes to Mercury Morris, who took it on the 1 yard line or something like that, ran it back for a touchdown. And if you lived in a town like that had that kind of bond to the team, and and I'm not just talking about a city and a team, I'm talking about a city and a team and a time. Because the Dolphins have been playing ever since, and I could care less, honestly. The city and the team and the time, the 70s for the Packers, and I'm sorry, for the Steelers, and the 60s for the Packers, and so on. It was a magical moment, and I just think we lost a good man, and it took me back to a time that was certainly a lot simpler time, and as you say, sometimes we have to mark the milestones of the people who matter to this particular cohort. There's just a group of us of a certain age to whom this matters, and a lot of those people are watching the show, and I'm sure they all have memories of those times as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're grateful to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this show possible, as well as for our friends at the Patriot Post. And the Patriot Post, also not a big sports site, but they do, if you're a conservative, you're going to want to check out the Patriot Post on a daily basis to make sure you never miss a day. They'll send you an email update, and when you sign up for that email update, they'll actually give you a free copy of the Patriots Primer on American Liberty. We'll provide a link in the description below. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.